Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Mind. My name is Nimade Belu, or That African Butterfly, as I'm known on social media. And I am so excited to bring another great guest for you this week. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. So even though we talk about mental health all the time here, we're really trying to focus in this month on talking to some specialists about different mental disorders and mental illnesses. Today, I have with me Gary Jones. He is an LCSW, and I'll have him explain those letters for us in a moment. But he's a licensed clinical social worker and a psychotherapist. He has worked he has worked in the mental health field for over 20 years and is passionate about improving the community he serves and helping individuals to realize their strengths and navigate life's challenges. He's the founder of Surviving Today LLC, where he utilizes and integrates therapy approaches, which is trauma focused and utilizes cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness techniques. Thank you so much for joining me today, Gary.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And so I told them that you would give us a little bit more information about what those letter means. I know it means, licensed clinical social worker, but what exactly does that mean?
So what that basically means, okay, so in the state of Pennsylvania, which is where pretty much I'm based, to become a licensed clinical social worker, generally you have to have graduated from a school of social work. Generally a graduate school of social work. So generally what happens is that you and this is probably kind of maybe national wide too as well, but generally what happens is that social work schools will offer bachelor level programs, so you can get a bachelor's degree in social work. That's a BSW. Then usually the next step for people is they'll go back to graduate school, go through all the toil and turmoil you got to do with that. Then you graduate with your master's of social work, which generally we call it MSW. Now, at that point, you can decide to do what you want to do at the time. Some people will decide that they are okay with just having the graduate degree, and that's fine. Some of us want to do a little bit more, and that was me. I wanted to do a little bit more. So after I graduated from Temple University with my master's in social work, what I did was I did some study and applied to get my license to become a licensed social worker, which we describe as being an LSW. So in Pennsylvania, that's like the first level of going along the track of doing an LCSW. So in LCSW, basically what happens, the next step is you would have to get this LCSW degree, you got to sit under supervision, a certain amount of face-to-face hours you have to collect within, I'm going to say within at least a 2-year span. It can be longer, but within at least a 2-year span. So once you get those hours, once you complete those hours under supervision, it can be individual supervision, it can be group supervision. Now you have to kind of know the numbers. Each state might be a little bit different, but in general, you get those hours. So at that point, you apply with the state board to take your licensed clinical social work test. So if I didn't say it earlier, like LCSW means licensed clinical social worker. So you do that, and then when you pass that exam, then basically that's generally the highest level that you really need to do in terms of social work. Now, some people will go on, obviously, if they want to go on to a doctorate program, they can do that. You check your state. A lot depends upon what you want to do. At that point, some people will stop. Some people might decide they want to go and get a doctorate degree. But in terms of certification, LCSW is about the highest you go. Now, in different states, there's different regulations. There might be an LCSW, but you might not have to take an LSW exam. So I always tell people, wherever you're going at, you need just to check and to see. Some states will also allow you to do a reciprocation process where you can do if like I was licensed in Pennsylvania, and through that process, I was able to be licensed in Delaware and in Maryland. So I didn't have to go and then resit and take those hours all over again. I didn't have to do that. I just, I was blessed to be able to have that, be in that situation where, it was able to be, um, I guess, to be accepted by all three states.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you so much for explaining that a little bit. I know that we get like all of the letters and the things after each people's names, and they don't always know exactly what they mean. So when we have the time to just like say like, okay, what exactly is that? It's helpful. So
thank you for asking, because the one thing that I like to encourage people to do is to feel free to ask. I think a lot of times we can become intimidated behind the letters, and we don't want to ask what it means. And it's okay. Well, it's okay to ask me. I have no problem with that, because I think that if we don't know, then we'll assume.
yeah,
And when we assume, we can make mistakes. So and I think I would like to say that any credible clinician would be okay with telling you and explaining what the letters mean, what they do, and how they work in terms of being an LCSW. I'm sure that I would like to think that anyone would want to tell you that. So
yeah, absolutely. And within your field, you work with a broad range of people on different topics, but you especially focus in on working with Black men in the community, which I think is vitally important and very much needed. So that's what we're going to focus more of our conversation on tonight.
great.
And there's so many places to start that conversation and topics, but I'm going to start from something that I found out last year during a series of interviews, which was shocking to me, which is that Black men. So, for those who may not know, there's like a diagnostic books as far as like what to look for different mental illnesses. It's called the
Mhm.
D5, right?
The DSM, well, it's the DSM-5, and I think they have a new, a kind of little bit of an addition to it, the DSM-5 TR, I believe is what it is. But basically, it's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual.
Yeah.
Um, and they've had from one, I think the first one was like sometime, I believe, in the 80s or 90s, something like that, and back
Mhm.
in back in the Stone Age and stuff, and it has progressed throughout the years.
It has progressed, but what's I think is lacking is the progression of the cultural awareness in making those diagnostics. So I found out that Black men are more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than other races, and it's not necessarily because it's more prevalent with them. It's because the way that they may show certain mental illness symptoms and
Mhm.
attributes, people will put it to schizophrenia when it necessarily shouldn't be. So can you just talk a little bit more about like I guess how that happens and why?
Well, first of all, I think that we don't take. First of all, like anything, the DSM-5 can be misapplied, misunderstood. I think a lot of times people who are diagnosing individuals don't really fully understand. They don't investigate, and then we want to add in the whole cultural aspect of it. So a lot of times we might have maybe primarily, white therapists, clinicians, psychiatrists, who might really be totally unfamiliar with the nuances of the cultures of Black and brown people. So if you've been trained that a person talking to himself is an aspect of schizophrenia, if that's the way you've been trained, then anybody that you talk to, anyone that you treat from that point on, you're going to assume that's the case. And a lot of times I think what happens is that so people don't understand the culture. They don't know what Black men are going through. They don't know what Black women are what Black people in general are going through. So therefore they will now take it and it will become misappropriated. The other danger I think that we have is the fact that sometimes people just don't check the understand that if you are diagnosed with schizophrenia, basically what that says is that whatever that psychiatrist saw, that therapist saw at that particular time in your life was their judgment. Now, that represents what they think they saw based on all of the actions, words, whatever. It's based on all of that. Now, the problem is that it's so easy for that diagnosis, especially if an individual is constantly in the hospital, it's so easy for that to just become the norm. So every time a person's in the hospital doesn't necessarily mean that they are, schizophrenic, or that it was a schizophrenic situation that caused them to get there. So a lot of times what happens is that we're ruling out we're ruling out what might actually be going on with that person. Like what happened to that person to get to that point where now that they're looking like they're talking to themselves, and so the DSM-5 attempts to give an overview of what that might look like and what to look for. But you can't always just go exactly by that. You have to consider other aspects of what might be going on in that person's life.
Absolutely. And as we talk about what signs are there, what to look for, let's take it even just a step back further because I mentioned a little bit about depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. And those are what we're really going to be focusing on. But
Mhm.
everyone gets anxious. Like when is it anxiety, or people get sad? When is it depression? And I think even just schizophrenia is like this huge word, but like what does it really mean? So could you just break down the three of those first and just kind of tell us exactly what they are? From the aspect of mental illness, not just casual, oh, I'm sad, oh, I'm anxious.
So if we're talking about, do you want me to talk about schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, at the very basic root of it, schizophrenia is basically it's a thought disorder. So we everything that is going to be based on that diagnosis is based on the way the person is thinking. What they're projecting in their thought. Um, you're going to probably hear some people might be talking to themselves. They might be responding to themselves. you know um so everything is about thought. So some parts of the thought that we're talking about might be parts of it, might be like paranoia. A person could be very paranoid about what's going on around them. They can be very delusional about what, or at least what we're going to perceive to be as that. So once again, that is mostly a thought disorder. So the DSM-5 is going to basically look at how the person is presenting in thought. Now, the next, I would say that the next stage to talk about would be schizophrenic, not schizophrenic, schizoaffective disorder, because that's going to transition us over towards thinking about thought disorder. I mean, toward mood disorders. Schizoaffective disorder is a thought and a mood disorder. And when I say that, I mean there are aspects of people who have that diagnosis that may talk to themselves. They understanding that schizophrenia sort of indicating that that person can't control at all. Schizoaffective disorder is kind of halfway the opposite. It's saying that this person has some of those situations, some of those thoughts and actions that cause them to do some things, but there are times it's depending upon their mood. So, if they get anxious, if they get depressed, maybe that stimulates some of those other thought processes that's happening with that individual. Now, with that, I would say that would then help us to transition to what depression and anxiety is. Um, I like what you said earlier. First of all, understand that depression and anxiety is something that all of us, it impacts all of us are depressed at different times. All of us are anxious at different times. The only difference is that if and the DSM will try to go through different categories of like different steps of like what would cause clinical depression. But the reality is that basically what's going to, I would say, would cause the difference between maybe you being depressed and me not being depressed is probably I didn't go see a therapist. Probably I didn't end up in the hospital. So I could be very depressed, but nobody knows because I've done things or been able to keep myself out of the system. But for people who haven't been, this is what happens. So there are some things you look for in terms of depression, like is the person eating, is the person sleeping, are they in isolation, for anxiety. we're looking panic attacks. We're looking at extreme anxiety where a person just can't seem to relax. And so I would say to you though that basically those would be the things that you're mostly looking at in terms of a clinical diagnosis. But I also want to make sure that everybody knows that a lot of things can cause those things. So, and also keep in mind that just because that's happening right now does not mean that that would be the same thing that happens, you know, a week from now, or a month from now, or a year from now, depending on what that person's able to do or what type of help that they get.
Yeah. No, those are great points. And I also wanted to mention that, first of all, thank you everyone who's joining us. I see your questions. They are wonderful, and we're going to circle back to them because there are some really great ones. I just want to get through a few of these first, but thank you, and please keep them coming because I will be asking them. Something I wanted to ask you too, Gary, is like, what are some common like what do you think are some cultural and societal factors that influence the like the prevalence or the manifestations of these mental health conditions, particularly in Black men? Like, because there are some things that are internalized and it's all your chemicals and things in your bodies, but we know that the outside world can play a role in that. And then especially depending on your race, gender, sexuality, those things impact that. So when we think about like Black men specifically, what are some outside factors or cultural society factors that might influence and impact their mental health?
I mean, for Black men, for sure. I mean, one of the things I would say is going to be if the things that we're trained from the very beginning. We are fed this thing about what a man is. So to be fed what a man is, you got to be told what a man is not. So you got to be so if you're crying, if you're sensitive, that's not considered like manly. That's not something. So we deal with that. And to show how that kind of comes into play, think about a young man growing up in, say, any neighborhood. That's a tough neighborhood, whatever that neighborhood might be. He has to project a certain way sometimes just to survive, or find another way to project in order to survive. Some young men will project, a tough exterior, but there's a lot of fear inside. Because once again, society says you can't be weak. Society says you can't talk to nobody. You can't um I'm not going to say you can't get help, but what does that help look like for you? So you got all of those stresses, and let's throw in all the other things that kind of add to that: incarceration, lack of finance. Some of us have grown up in very impoverished situations, where we probably didn't have as much money as we wanted to have. So how do we go about doing that? And then we talk about incarceration. We take our young men and we incarcerate them, or for whatever the reasons are, and then we let them. They come home, but we don't give them any skills, to help them to get back into society in a productive way. So I think those are some of the stresses that we're dealing with, and really the whole issue once again of what does it mean to be a man? I mean, what does it mean? Do I have to be a tough man? Can I be sensitive? So now here's the thing: the reality is that we can be all of those things. We don't have to be always fighting and stuff like that and feeling like we got to defend ourselves. No, one of the things I try to tell people is that you got to learn emotional regulation. You got to learn how to control your feelings. Everything that you want to respond to, you can't respond to. So I think that's a big piece here. So a lot of us feel that we have to do that. We feel that this is bravado. We feel that this, and other aspects is, look at what society feeds us. They don't really feed us for a Black man. You don't hear a lot about the successful Black man who's a scientist, or the successful Black man who might be, I'm just trying to think of some chemist or something, where it normally seems to be reserved for other races. But think about what you are served. You are served the gang guy. You're
Mhm.
served the father who has, you know, all these children. You're not served the father who has children that's taking care of his children though.
Right, right.
You see the
Yep.
difference. So a lot of times we have to looking at what society has given us. So when you see this, and if you don't have a way to counteract that, then you may go in that direction. You're probably going to go in the direction of, hey, you know what? Um, I don't have a choice. So this is what I'm going to do. I think the key for our young men is we have to be able to show them you do have a choice. The choice might not be easy to make. I think we have to allow that to be a part. The choice may not be easy to make. And I think we act like our kids have easy choices to make, and they're not easy. But there are some very definite choices that they might have to make that will definitely alter which way their lives go.
Yeah, definitely. And Charles had a great comment. He said, when I was growing up, seeking help wasn't even considered an option when dealing with mental health. And I think we see that a lot. It's getting better, I would say slowly, but definitely there's still that stigma around mental health, and especially in the Black community. And it affects men, and I mean, everyone in general, but men seeking the help that they need. So, what's a way, like, A, that you see that stigma still holding people back, and like how can we start to help combat that to encourage people to get help?
I mean, I think it starts because once again, in our cultures, we don't think about mental health. We're not thinking about it. Um, we're not thinking about therapy as an option. I think that's the first place we need to think about. We're not thinking about that as an option. So once again, it begins early. So you're not thinking that that's what you need to do. The other piece of it is that if we're going to be totally honest about it, mental health therapy was not necessarily developed for us as a people. Let's be totally honest. It really wasn't. It wasn't, you know, when you go back and you look at all of the great theorists and stuff like that and look at their models of, you know, health, etc., it didn't really have us in mind. No, the people that they studied, and we're not people that look like us, so their outcomes were not geared for people that look like us. So now you ask the question, how do we change that? I think we got to be proactive. I mean, I work with a group of men called Black Men Heal, and we provide 8 free sessions, eight free therapy sessions for Black men. The whole idea was to reach Black men who might not even normally think about coming to therapy. Okay, and also to remove the barriers. So here's the thing: everybody, therapists have to charge. We understand that. That's just something, you know, you gotta keep the lights on, you gotta keep the gas on, you gotta do all those type of things. But the 8 free sessions that we try to provide through Black Men Heal is is off for men, and you don't have to be like not able to pay. Just you contact, blackmenheal.org, and what happened, they hook you up for therapists. And once they so we get guys in there who sometimes are not really thinking about therapy as an option, or they heard about it, but whatever. What I've noticed that some of the guys that I've met through that started out maybe not really thinking it was going to be something beneficial, and then they stayed with it. So I think we got to move the obstacles out the way. We got to find ways to make therapy accessible,
Hmm.
to some degree. Um, um, we have to provide education. We need to go into the places where people are at and provide education. Me and some of the gentlemen who I'm going to be with next week are from Black Men Hill, and we're going to be at Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church in Philly, and we're doing something called from checkup from the neck up. And once again, what's going on up here? What is happening up here? You can be the biggest, buffest dude. You can be, but if up here isn't right, then you got all this stress that you're carrying. And guess what? That stuff right there is going to eat at you. It's going to get you. You know, a lot of us are walking around carrying pains and hurts. And because we've never been taught how to talk about it and how to address it, it shows up in how we act and react with everybody else around us, our loved ones, our significant others, spouses, girlfriends, children, and because we don't know how to address that need, and we have to learn how to address that need. So I'm hoping that I answered your question, but I'm just saying basically, I mean, we have to be we have to begin the conversation at the grassroots, and I think we have to, people who are doing it have to connect with other people that are doing it, and then try to make sure venues like this right here, what you're doing is one of the steps of how you provide that education to get people to understand what they need.
Hmm.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, thank you for joining me. And yes, you did answer my question. And something that you pointed out, which I think is important, is that therapy wasn't always invented for people like us. And I think sometimes that we forget a major barrier besides just, financial and different things like that, is that there's a built-in mistrust of the medical system for the Black community. And we didn't come up with it on our own. Like, there's a reason why there's that mistrust there.
It's
But how do you address it, and how do you? I mean, I think definitely one of the ways is with your Black Men Heals, giving them the 8 sessions, letting them work through it. But what are some other ways to sort of address that mistrust that would help encourage people to seek out medical treatment?
I mean, I think one of the things that I try to do and what we try to do with Black Men Hill and just my other colleagues that are out here doing this, first of all, I mean, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. It's real. I mean, the fact that you don't trust it, the fact that historically we haven't trusted this, that's a real thing. So what I'm not going to do is act like this doesn't exist. The reality, when we think about all the different things that the medical profession has done, using us as experiments, all kinds of things, from the slavery, from slavery days, we think about, everyone knows what happened with the Tuskegee experiment, so I think we got to begin by acknowledging that. We have to acknowledge that all of those things are real. I mean, so we're not going to pretend those things didn't happen. They happen. But something bad can happen, but it doesn't mean that the thing is bad. It just means that the thing was misused. So therapy has been misused with, or just not so much therapy, but just the fact that things that have been done to us have been used and have totally been misused. Now, the thing I think we have to do is that the concept is still a good concept. We need to begin to let people know that it's still beneficial. But now let's make it work for us. Let's understand what that means for us. The reality is that that's why part of why we're here in this forum right now. There are some people, I mean, if you and I'm not saying that white therapists are evil and bad. There's a lot of them that are good, but they also have to learn how to treat this population. So I think that's the other piece we got to consider. So, but if you are, a Black man, woman, child that is not getting that from someone else, then, think about getting it from us. But let's also understand therapy, good therapy is good therapy. Whether it's white or Black, okay, whereas Latino, Asian, whatever, good therapy is good therapy. Now it helps if you can connect with someone that you feel comfortable with, but that can be cultural wise. It can be in terms of how you identify sexually. It could be what. But the thing is that you have the choice to pick what you want to do, how you want to do. And guess what? If you come to Gary Jones and Gary Jones doesn't really meet your needs, then you can go to somebody else. And that's not a slight on me. I don't feel bad. I don't think that you hate me or that whatever. Or I know I think what it means is that maybe I didn't. Yeah, and maybe that's something I need to sit back and think about, and if you tell me, I'll try to improve it. But I guess I'm trying to say that the thing has not always been a good thing. It has not always been used. It's been used punitively sometimes, I guess, in some ways. So now we got to look at how can we take something and create it and make it work for us. And I think that involves the entire community as a collective. We have to think
Yeah.
about what that looks like. And so I'm going to say this is an ongoing conversation. This is not a conversation that is going to be over next week, because the problems are not going to be over next week. So we have to continue to do what we need to do to make this thing as understandable as usable for us. Once again, I think like the person said earlier, um, mental health was never an option, or wasn't really considered. Look, we think about what we do. When we go to our places of worship.
Yeah.
We go to our churches, we go to our mosque. And those can be incredible places, and sometimes they're not incredible places. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say that one more time. They can be incredible places for healing, and sometimes they're not incredible places for healing, especially if the people are not trained to deal with depression, to
Hmm.
deal with trauma, to deal with anxiety, to deal with all the things that maybe men need individual and that women need individual. So
Hmm.
just that would be probably where I would say is a key area that we all need to think about how we can grow in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always get on my little soapbox and I say, like, I have a dream because I don't know when or how, but I'm going to sync up with a organization because I do think religion plays such a huge role in our culture and in our community. And my dream is that all pastors and reverends would at least be mental health first aid trained. Like just that bare minimum of having like the basics of knowing what to look for so that they know when it needs to go past the length of us just having a casual conversation to you need to get help to another level. I know it's a barrier because not everyone believes in it, but I really think that it would be just that little bit would be impactful. Them and barbers, like they could get mental health first aid trained.
Ooh,
I feel like it'd make a huge difference.
listen, there's so much healing that goes on in barbershops that you have no idea. I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
when I used to have hair and I used to go to the barbershop, I used to love being there because, I sitting there talking to my barber and I knew the other barbers in that particular place. And we would just sit back and you just listen and you get engaged in other conversations and the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that is one of the places where Black men go
Exactly.
for, and I don't think that we think of it as a therapeutic place or a place of healing, but just to be able to go there and hang out for a minute, talk to you guys, hear your friends and they come in, etc., engage in the conversation, the sports and stuff like that. And I agree. So that to me, I think that the barbershop is definitely a place of therapy. And I think we got to look at, and I think when you stop and you take therapy out of the traditional reign, then the barbershop, the church house, is a place to go. Now, what I'm going to say is that it can be a therapeutic place, but you still need to go where you need to go. I
Right.
oftentimes when I'm talking to folk that are in church, I often tell people, it's okay to have Jesus and a therapist too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not original with me. I didn't develop that saying, but it's true. It's okay to have Jesus and a therapist. It's okay to believe in what you believe, your faith, the faith that you're built in, strong, surrounded in, but also to be able to step out of that. Because I think what happens is that some people feel like, well, if I go meet with a therapist, I'm not trusting God, and I guess my challenge for that would be you got to go out and your deacon might be the nicest guy, your pastor might be the really nicest guy, might know his word very well, but if he doesn't know how to deal with depression and anxiety and the trauma that you face from your mama, your daddy, you know, and everybody. If that pastor, a deacon can't help you with that, they will do more damage
That part.
than
Yep.
good.
Yep.
So it's okay. It's okay to to have Jesus and a therapist too. Now I'm going to also say you can stop me because there's some subjects where I get very passionate about. So please stop me because then that's one of them because I just feel that people. I feel like there's a whole education piece with our spiritual our spiritual places of worship where
Yeah.
we have to let people know that you know you need to it's okay to get help, and for pastors and to let them know that if you don't know, it's okay to admit that you don't know. You know, I'd rather tell somebody I don't know what I don't know than to try to pretend that I know and mess
Mhm.
you up.
Yeah. No, and I love your passion about it. And I might have to have you back for a whole nother episode because like that is my soapbox
Yeah.
as well, only because like I've dealt with some mental stuff and some of it I have like literal religion trauma from my pastors not dealing with it the way that they should. And it's why I'm so passionate about believing that people should get mental health first aid because you don't have to be a therapist, but if
Yes.
you could at least know the better language to talk to people about, you know, we talked about barbershops being a place of
Mhm.
therapy within themselves, but if
Mhm.
they could know the warning signs of someone, hey, like, hey, bro, like, this is great conversation. You might want to take this to another level.
There you
I
go.
think that that would be so helpful and so impactful because, you know, when we talk about, and trigger warning, you know, if we talk about suicide rates, like, there's more attempts on at taking their lives from women, but there's more fulfillment. I don't know the right word to use, completion of the act for
That's
men
the
because
word
they
that
tend to
people are
use
using.
firearms.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, if we could have things in place where people know those warning signs, they don't have to be a full therapist, but if they know those warning signs, especially in our community, I think it would be hugely impactful.
I totally agree with you when you talk about mental health first aid training. I don't think we can get enough of that. You know, everyone doesn't have to be an LCSW. Everyone doesn't have to be a therapist. Everyone doesn't have to be a psychologist, psychiatrist. You don't have to be that. But what you do need to do is you need to be somebody that knows. You need to be somebody that knows how to help or to lead towards help. You know, I think that there are basic things that everybody could learn how to help folk with. And then once again, when you get to that point, your comfort level where you don't know anything else more than knowing where you can lead people at, well, maybe they can get, you know, the help that they need. I think, and I think the problem I'm going to say is, you know, our whole concept of what we think therapy is.
Yeah.
The traditional way of therapy is I come to your office, I sit in your chair, your couch, whatever, and I talk to you, you listen, you nod your head, you ask me a couple questions, and then we're done until the next time we do it. Now, that's the traditional way that therapy is done. Not saying that that don't work for some people. Yes, definitely in the hair salon. Okay, you know, but I mean that might work for some people, but that doesn't work for everybody. Um, I think people of passion.
Yep.
I think people of passion, they're gonna need a little bit more. You know, I think one thing why a lot of people of color uh, tend to go, not always, not exclusively, but towards people of color therapists and clinicians is because, you know, we understand. You know, we understand when that child is getting out of line. We know what that feels like because some of us done had children that's out of line. You know, we understand that breakup. You know, and I think what happens, the way we communicate it is a little differently. Some people may not be able to understand the way it's communicated,
Yeah.
but rapport is the key thing. I have to establish a rapport with you first. If I don't establish a rapport with you, you're not really going to want to listen to me. So why should you come to me? You know, um, so I think that's the big things. I think we have to take the elephant out of therapy and understand that it's really about meeting people at their need, at the point of their need. And once again, some people may not be ready for therapy, but you know what? If you can get some help in the barbershop and the hair salon, I'm going to say talk to somebody. Don't just not talk, because when you don't just talk, that problem is still there when you wake up tomorrow morning. It's there. It's not. It didn't go anywhere. It's just waiting for you to wake up.
Right. Yeah, and Izzy said, yes to hair salon, and I agree. Actually, my full vision, because I've identified 4 places that I feel like people go to for therapy without even realizing it's therapy, like you said, right? Because it's different from them. But for me, it's your churches, it's your pastors, your leaders, it's your barber shops, it's your hair salon stylists, and it's your bartender. It's people sitting at the bar talking to their bartenders about their life problems. So I feel like if those people in those 4 professions, there is a push for them to at least get mental health first aid, to know when, like, A, to know not how to give more damaging advice and feedback, but then B, also to help them identify when, hey, I should tell this person to maybe go to the next level. I think it would be
Yeah.
hugely impactful. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but that's my dream. My vision is to push and work with
I
an
love your
organization to
vision.
make that happen.
I love your vision. I think that's a great vision because I think once again and I think that everyone here would agree. Those are 4 places that people go to. A lot of people go, you know, out to a bar or something, not because they alcoholics, not because they just got to get that drink. No, because somebody there that they can talk to that's going to understand what they're going through, and they can offer some kind of some kind of assistance, or at least if nothing else, a listening ear. So those are the places where people go, and I'm just saying that is real talk. I think that the vision that you have in terms of how you want to reach out there, I think that's excellent because the people are there. The
Mhm.
people are there. I mean, it is, they are.
Thank you. Oh, and Charles said, we can relate and communicate better to someone who looks like you and understand where you're coming from. And I think that that's huge, and it helps to remove that barrier when you're trying to build that rapport, which is important. I know a lot of times people say, because I've taught anti-racism course, I know, and people who love to say like, "Oh, I don't see color," like I don't see color, and really, unfortunately, that's the opposite of what you need to do, because when you don't see color, we live in a society where everything goes back to white is right. So when you don't see color, you're really actually comparing everyone's actions, thoughts, and everything to a scale of whiteness. And if it's not there, then there's a problem. Versus if you actually see color, then you're able to say, like, oh no, that's just a cultural thing. Like that person, like we started this talking about schizophrenia. That person who's mumbling to themselves isn't just mumbling to themselves, they're singing rap lyrics, or they're singing to themselves. They're doing something that might be culturally fine, but you don't realize that because you're not seeing color. So I think, especially with therapists, like you mentioned, it's easier to try to connect with someone who you don't have to talk through that part. At least they already get the cultural side of things, and you don't have to explain yourself on how you say different things, different slangs, different nuances.
I think once again, understanding the language is key, and understanding what a person's actually saying. I do want to touch on the color thing, but I want to say something real quick. I used to work in a day program, and the individuals that we worked with were primarily were diagnosed with either schizophrenia, um, or some sort of intellectual disability, you know. And I remember that there was a young lady there that was one of my clients, and I remember like every Friday we'd have like Friday would be like an easy day. It wasn't really a whole like around 12 o'clock. Well, after lunch, we like put some music on and we just kind of relax as opposed to doing the normal tasks that people were doing. And there was this one young lady, and we put the music on, and she would always say, "We're gonna take them children and raise them up." Now, I didn't really know what she was saying. Initially, I thought Okay, I don't know if this part of a cycle or something like that, and I didn't know if this was like schizophrenic. I didn't know what it was until one day I was listening to James Brown, The Payback, and realized that near the end of that record, that's what he says. She was repeating what she heard, and it was something that she liked. When the music was played, that's what they would play. Is what you think about something. How many people thought that there was something wrong with her because she said that, not knowing that where that came from. So I think when we talk about people who say, I don't see color, my question is, what's wrong with seeing color? I think the world is beautiful in color.
Exactly.
I think the world is beautiful in color. What's wrong with not? I mean, what's wrong with seeing color? Why is that a problem to see color? Okay, so with that being said, um, people who oftentimes say, I don't see color, oftentimes what they're trying to say is, I'm not racist. So therefore, I don't see color. Everybody's the same. But the reality is, everybody's not the same.
That part.
Everybody's
That part.
everybody's everybody's history and everybody's circumstances and experiences are not the same. Now, how you want to weigh that's totally up to you as a person, but everybody's not the same. So to me, when you say you don't see color, you're saying you don't see the fact that everybody has some issue, especially people of color have have been victimized. I couldn't get that out for a second, but victimized, or have had stuff that's happened to them. So we're just going to pretend that other stuff didn't happen, and we see that happen a lot in the news. And when you hear other people say, "Well, why does everything have to be about race?" Well, listen, race is a big piece of it. We can't act like race. Acknowledging race doesn't make you a racist or saying that you're calling other people racist. It just means we acknowledge that it is, once again, that pink and blue elephant that's in the room that everybody's trying to pretend ain't there, but it's there. And I always tell people, well, okay, how do you know it's not there? It's there because we keep talking about it. No, it's there because stuff happens every day and every week where race becomes an issue. And once again, every time that you go to do your census, every 10 years, I forget how long it is now, you have to, you know, are you black? Are you white? Are you da 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 da? When you go do an application, what they want to know your race. Some places still want to do that. Or, you know, President Obama. One thing I want to say about that I find very unique. Everyone is very quick to say, "Well, we had our first black president." Um, sorry, Mr. Clinton. Anyway, we had the first black president. But I want you to think about something. We had our first black president, but have we ever had a time when we didn't have a white president? Now, some people are going to probably say, yeah, of course, Gary, yeah, for 8 years. No, we had a white president then too, because Barack Obama is part white. If race is not an issue, people would have acknowledged that, but they didn't. They don't acknowledge that. So when we don't acknowledge color, we don't acknowledge a person's whole existence. We don't acknowledge what brings them to who they are. So I think when people go to people that look like them, they feel validated. They feel like people understand what they are getting ready to say. Does that mean that every black male therapist is for every black man? No, of course not. Okay, but in general, that's the thought process. And that's why and that's one of the reasons why some people don't go to therapy, because unfortunately they might have tried a white therapist. No, and no, I know some excellent white therapists, but they might have tried some of them and their approach just didn't hit home
Yeah.
with them. And so we gotta you gotta see the world in color. You have to see the world. If you don't see the world in color, you're gonna miss a whole lot of things. I'm old enough. See, I'm sorry. I'm old enough to remember black and white TV. Some of the audience may not be. I can remember black and white TV, and when my grandparents used to go get the color screen to put up there to try to give it a tinge of color, because we couldn't afford a color television at that point. But point I'm making is that black and white was bland. When you got to see things in color, it was, man, oh, that's a nice blue suit. That's a nice red dress. You know, it changed the way you look at it. So, I mean, what's wrong with seeing color?
Yep, absolutely. And building that rapport and um, just whatever you need to do to feel comfortable to go to therapy, even if you need to try different therapists, you know. And first of all, thank you so much for your time. I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I just have one other question. I'm
You
going
can
to
keep me as long as you want to. I got absolutely positively nothing, no place to go. So whatever you need is fine. I know you want to answer some of the questions too, so that's cool.
Yeah, I've been sort of trickling them in. The last one I wanted to get to, which is one that Izzy asked first, which is the best way to encourage someone experiencing crisis to seek help. And I'm actually going to combine that with a question that Robert had, which was
Mhm.
about the difference between bipolar and schizophrenia. So can you just sort of tell us the difference between that, and then like what are some ways, like if we see it, those signs, what are some ways to encourage people to seek help if we think they're in crisis?
That the I would say that the layman's way of looking at it would be this: bipolar is, once again, it is a mood, it's a mood disorder primarily. Schizophrenia is a thought disorder. The difference between that is basically people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder basically show an indication of moods going up and going down. Now, all of us have changing moods. There are sometimes when we're up, sometimes when we're down. But a person that's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you're going to find is that usually the ups are usually high, often manic, and they stay for a long stage of time. So like oftentimes, now you can just be manic as well. That's a whole other story. But a person at that stage, some people like that stage. Like a lot of people who are artists and writers, because what's actually happening is you're getting a lot of stuff done, but you're just you're on all cylinders. You're here, you're there, you da da da, and what essentially, I think an easy way to explain it is you drop. And then you drop, and then you go down to a place where you're just not depressed. You're just ultra like out of it. You're done. And no, you can't do anything. You can't focus. So you go from being super high, super up there to down here. And the cycle repeats itself. So the thing is, a lot of times what psychiatrists are going to try to do is give you some medications that will help you to balance those mood swings so that you're not constantly going all the way up and then constantly coming all the way back down. Hopefully staying a little bit balanced where there might be some upswings, there might be some downswings. But now as far as schizophrenia, once again, schizophrenia is usually the person that a psychiatrist or therapist would say, once again, they don't seem to have any concept of what's really going on around them. So we see people out in the street, they have the clothes on or very little clothes or dirty clothes. They're talking, they're walking in the street, they're talking to themselves, or they could be individuals that aren't at that level. But once again, everything is like I'll give you an example. I have a person that I see on my day job who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He believes that a girl that he used to date, that he knew her when they were kids. He's older than this person. They were not kids together. you know he believes that the county that he lives in um, is after him. Uh, he believes that the county next to him is after him and won't let him go back to school. Um, you know, constantly at odds with his parents. And what's another good thing? I mean, people are always taking his wallet. People's coming into his bedroom. these are all signs of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, once again, can be a combination of a lot of things. It can be, you know, paranoia. It can be some anxiety. What I will say to you is we need to understand that a lot of times it's based on something. Like there's usually a basis. Something happened. Something went awry, but somewhere along the line, it was based on something. This person I'm telling you about, he really did date this girl. Okay. Um, but when and he was doing well, but when things went downhill, he stopped taking his medications, et cetera, and so on. And this, so I mean, I hope this once again, schizophrenia is more thought than anything. It's
Mhm.
not really based on your moods. Although if you're up a little bit, you might not be as, and if you're down a little bit, you might be more. But the reality is that's more of it's more of a cognitive thought process.
And
Um, I'm
no,
sorry.
oh no, you're doing guys. Because so like if we have those people in our lives and we see sort of those signs of it, right? Whether it's being extra anxious with anxiety or extra low for long periods of time with depression or those mood swings of bipolar or the thoughts of schizophrenia, how can we encourage someone to seek help if we think that they are in crisis mode or approaching crisis mode?
I think you have to develop a dialogue. I mean, I think once again, a lot will depend upon the rapport that you have with that person. You gotta develop a dialogue. You I would say trying to get them to trust you to even begin the conversation. Would you think about it? Would you consider, you know, um, meeting with someone, talking with someone? Hey, listen, I know a guy you might want to talk, or in the area, if in some areas there might be crisis center, not so much a crisis center, I guess, but like respite places where people can go at and they can rest or something. Um, the first thing I think we have to try to do is get a person to believe that one, that there's an issue. We have to try to. I think that's the first thing we do. Um, if that doesn't work, then I think we have to look at what can we do to keep a person safe. So, um, is this person doing stuff that's putting themselves in danger? um, if they're doing stuff that's putting themselves in danger, then we have to think about, at that point, do we need to do a crisis move or something? Do we need to do wellness checks on people just to make sure that they're okay? Those are some things we have to do. I think at this point, I would also say I would incorporate what you were saying earlier about the mental health first aid training, learning more about what else can we do to communicate that there is a need to possibly get help. Um, but the person's got to want the help. The person has to believe somehow that they need to talk to somebody, to talk about the depression that they got going on, and to talk about the roots of the depression. See, that's the problem. Is this not so much the depression; it's the things that cause the depression in the first place. Some people are stressed with, taking care of kids and got nobody to help them. Some people are stressed because of family relationships that are not going well, um, parent and child relationships that are not going well, job relationships that are not going well. And I think those are things that people have to think about. So then the question becomes, okay, is mental health inherited? Is it something that can be passed on? Is it something, I personally, I think that you can be in a system, a family culture that might foster some depression and foster some anxiety. I don't know if there's a gene that causes that. I'm not sure that. I'm not going to go that far. But what I'm going to say is that you got to look at culture. If you if like for example, if you grew up in a family that's primarily alcoholic, chances are you're going to become an alcoholic or drink a lot. Now, there's also a chance that you might not.
Right.
Do you understand what this? So, because sometimes people will be like, okay, I'm watching all this happening in my life and around me, and I'm not going to be like my uncles and my aunties. I'm not going to be like them, So sometimes it causes people to go in the other direction. So, I think that's some. If you see a lot of people that a lot of things that's causing depression, then we have to think about what can we do that would help us not to foster that. So I'm going to say, I don't know if we inherit it. I think though that we live in the system long enough, we can learn to be that way.
Hmm.
Which
Well,
is
and genetics will always play a role in it. We've seen, like, even when we talk about things like way as far back as like slavery and trauma and things like that plays a part in your DNA as you go forward, even without having actual experience of it in the presence. But overall, though, this has been such a great conversation. Like I said, I could talk to you forever. I absolutely plan on having you back again
thank
because
you.
there's still too much more to talk about. But I am, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you everybody who watched and who shared your questions and your comments. We definitely appreciate the interaction.
Thank you again for allowing me to come back. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you?
I can be found on LinkedIn at Gary Jones. I can be found here on Facebook at Gary Jones LCSW. I can be found on IG at surviving underscore today underscore LLC.
Perfect. Thank
Definitely
you.
feel free to reach out.
Yes. And thank you to everybody who joined. I hope you come back next week. I'm going to have the podcast host of Dad Bods and Beards, Logan and Tyson, on to talk about mental health. Today we talked most about Black men, and next week we'll be talking about it from white men's culture and how it affects them and how they deal with it within their society. So please join us next week. And also, if you are watching this before July 27th, we are having our Mind, Body, and Soul all white moonlight party on the Spirit of Philadelphia for Feel Good Talk. So join us. You can purchase your tickets online still and have a great night out rocking your white with us. So I hope you'll get a ticket and come and have a fun night out with us. That's July 27th. Thank you, everyone.